settled in, we'll get started. My name is Damon Simmons. I'm one of the information officers assigned to the fire. I came with the State Fire Marshal's office, but we've got two teams here. We've got Team 7 and the State Fire Marshal Red Team working on this fire, working to keep this community safe. So we're humbled and we appreciate the trust that you're putting in us, and we look forward to serving you. The first person I'm going to introduce is the Deputy Forest Supervisor, Greg Trulock, and then we'll move right through a list of good speakers.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I just thought I had to yell. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate everybody coming. So the first thing I want to say is, no homes have been lost, no structures have been lost. So if anybody hadn't heard that news yet, I want to make sure that was out there. So what happened was Sunday was the third day of a 3-day wind event, and there was a piece of line on the 150 road that had a spot across it, and the winds were 30, gusted to 50 miles an hour up there. And I'm sure some of you have seen the videos from up there that showed what the winds were like. And so that spot got down into some really tall brush, and basically over the afternoon was off to the races. Ended up growing to just around 5,000 acres of growth, spotting way out in advance, up to several miles in advance across the Illinois River. So that's kind of what the event was. That piece of line hadn't shown any heat or smoke for nearly a week, is my understanding. There were still about 300 people working on the fire at the time. Most of them were scattered around the fire doing suppression repair and other work. But yeah, it was definitely, the extreme low relative humidities on that day, and being the third day of the wind event with really big gusts is what caused that. So on Sunday evening, the State Fire Marshal's office was mobilized through the Conflagration Act by the governor, and they were fully engaged by Monday and brought strike teams of engines, and they'll actually talk about that here in a little bit. And then obviously the sheriff implemented evacuation orders with the level 3 in the Oak Flat and Spud Road areas, and then level 2 for the Agnes area. So some of the other things I guess I wanted to talk about was that we have an IR flight, and this team will talk about what the plan is to move forward. But they have a good plan. They're very confident in the plan that they have, and they'll explain that. The other thing I wanted to do was just thank everybody. This summer has had a lot of people working together over a long period of time, and everybody pretty much thought our fire season was over. But Sunday saw everybody pull back together, work really well together, and implement things amazingly, I thought. And when I got here on Monday, things were well in hand, and we were doing amazing things. So with that,
Thank you. And then I'll introduce the rest of our speakers. So our plan for this afternoon is we're going to run through our speakers, and then we'll do breakouts so that if people need to get back to work or things like that, they can go. But if you have questions, we'll be here until the last person leaves and the last person's question's been answered. Okay. So next we're going to have our incident meteorologist, Larry Van Bussom, who will then pass to the fire behavioral analyst, Eric Johnson.
Good afternoon. So the current weather out there, we have some light easterly winds up high, about 10,000 feet, and what we're seeing at the ridge tops is some easterly winds and terrain-driven winds. Most areas are light. We're seeing a few wind reports out there of about 8 to 9, gusts to 15, 16, but that's very typical for the terrain-driven winds. It's getting some sunlight on it. So it's just driving those winds there. The conditions are very dry out there. We're getting relative humidities in the low teens, and I expect that to continue through the rest of this week. We got a pretty dry air mass above us, and that's going to keep us pretty dry through the remainder of the week. We're going to also stay in those light easterly winds though, so that's the good news, is we're not going to see a lot of wind on this fire, at least through the end of the week. Our overnight humidity recoveries are pretty poor, again with that dry air mass above us. We're getting, it's pretty good down in the valleys, and you get down under that smoke, it might get up to about 80%, but above that, it's staying pretty dry, so that is a concern. And so the outlook into this weekend, we're going to keep in that easterly flow until we get to about Friday, Saturday. We're going to start seeing those winds maybe switch around a little bit out of the south. Still just some dry conditions though, so overall we got this big high pressure over us, and it's really slow to move east, but starting on Saturday or so, it's going to kind of make its push inland, and when it does, those winds will turn a little bit to the south. We'll still remain a little dry though up above, but we may see the marine layer come in. And then the next possible precipitation, it's looking like maybe Tuesday, Wednesday. It's pretty far out there, so I wouldn't take the timing as gospel, but on my magic 8-ball, it looks like Tuesday or Wednesday maybe when we'll see our next rain come in. And that is your current and expected weather. Here's fire behavior.
Thanks, Larry. Eric Johnson, fire behavior. So I want to talk briefly about what got us here in the last several days and where we're going from here. So the wind event that was mentioned, real strong east wind with brutally dry humidity, so down to the single digits. That is really dry for this country. Does happen, and it was combined with really, really high winds. And so once the fire got established, it started spotting way out in front of itself, and those spot fires became established very quickly and then themselves spotted. So you see these paths of spot fires leading down and even across the Illinois River, and that's what was going on during that period, just a horizontal column with embers in it that would start fires, and those would produce more embers. So that brings us to Monday, and then to today. The pattern has completely changed. So now we have a light offshore, so east wind, and that is very, very dry still. I was up on Wildhorse Lookout earlier today, and we got a 90% humidity up there. Very dry, somewhat breezy up there, but it's not mixing down, and that's because we have this inversion layer. An inversion layer is a layer in the atmosphere that prevents it traps the smoke in it, it makes it moisture, no wind down there, and there's no shadows because there's no sun getting down into there. And so that's where it is right now. And so under that, the fire is going to behave very mellow as long as that inversion stays in place. So you will have pretty relatively moderate fire spread down underneath that. Above that, or if that inversion goes away, we'll start seeing increased fire behavior. And so if you come back afterwards over in their fire behavior station, I have some photos from today of an area of fire above that where it started getting more active, and then the inversion layer came up and just put it to sleep. And so for the next week, what Larry is telling us, what the weather models are saying, is that inversion layer is going to be very persistent over the next week. So we expect to be able to have really excellent conditions for firefighting, for operations. The challenge is that there's a lot of smoke, which means smoke down in your community. It also means smoke that makes it difficult for firefighters to get to and find the spot fires, but it also means the fire should behave itself as long as it remains under that layer.